There are structures that defy common sense, technologies that seem to have emerged ahead of their time, traces of civilizations that, according to traditional records, should never have existed, let alone left any marks. Yet the traces are there. There are submerged pyramids, secret passageways beneath the Sphinx, megaliths perfectly aligned with constellations long before the invention of any optical instrument. After centuries of silence and cover-ups, the pieces of this ancient puzzle are slowly beginning to surface. Giants, underground environments never explored, and a history that few dare to investigate, at least not publicly. What you're about to encounter here is far from mere curiosity. This is the kind of content that provokes, that stirs something dormant within us. Have you ever heard the term antediluvian? Though rarely used, it refers to everything believed to have existed before the flood described in sacred texts. According to biblical tradition, this event would have taken place around 2348 BC, when Noah, already 600 years old, witnessed a world swallowed by water. But science suggests other dates. Some experts point to 5500 BC, when the Mediterranean Sea may have flooded the Black Sea basin in a geological cataclysm. Others suggest an even earlier period, around 10,000 BC at the end of the last ice age, a time of violent climate changes that reshaped entire continents. And that is exactly when things start to get truly intriguing. What could these events have to do with forgotten peoples, colossal constructions, and mysteries that seem to stretch the boundaries of what we consider possible? Who lived during this hidden era of humanity? And more importantly, who could have built such complex structures, ones that still puzzle engineers and scientists today? There are many theories. Some are fascinating, others verge on the impossible. But the question remains, was uncovering these traces really a good idea? Or are these discoveries pushing us toward a new understanding of the past, and perhaps even of the future? In this video, I invite you on a journey through some of the greatest enigmas that precede the flood. And in the end, I want to hear your thoughts. Who do you think is behind it all? Let us begin with a mystery that challenges everything we thought we knew about antiquity. A new archaeological discovery is shaking the very foundations of historical knowledge. You've certainly heard of Stonehenge, that enigmatic circle of stones in the English countryside. It is more than 5,000 years old, and to this day, no one has been able to say with certainty who built it or for what purpose. But the mystery only deepens. At the heart of Stonehenge lies the so-called altar stone, a colossal rock weighing about 6 tons. For decades, it was believed that this stone, like many of the smaller ones in the complex, had been brought from the Preseli Hills in Wales. And that alone was astonishing. Moving such a stone for more than 225 kilometers without wheels, trucks or cranes is something hard to even imagine. But now, a surprising revelation changes everything. Recent studies show that this stone did not come from Wales. In fact, it may have originated from the Orkney Islands in the far north of Scotland. That's right, someone, thousands of years ago, transported this rock over more than 700 kilometers. An absurd distance, especially considering that part of the journey involved sea navigation. If Stonehenge was already a mystery, it now becomes almost unfathomable. How was this possible? Who had that knowledge and logistical capability so many millennia ago? Get ready, this is only the first piece of a much larger puzzle. But brace yourself, because now we're heading straight to the heart of Egypt, where one of humanity's most iconic monuments raises even more questions than answers. We are talking about the imposing Great Sphinx of Giza, located beside the pyramids and on the banks of the Nile River near Cairo. Just like Stonehenge, it carries with it a mystery that spans millennia. Who carved this colossal figure out of a single block of limestone? How were such massive blocks transported and fitted with such perfection? The name Sphinx comes from the ancient Egyptian language and can be translated as living image, which suggests a symbolic or spiritual function. It likely served as a kind of sacred guardian of the Giza Plateau, reflecting the power and divinity of the pharaoh. However, there is one aspect that puzzles scholars. When observing the surface of the Sphinx up close, one can see signs of erosion that do not match the typical effects of wind and sand. In fact, some claim that the wear appears to have been caused by water, and a lot of it. This hypothesis raises a surprising possibility. Could the Sphinx have been exposed to heavy rainfall or even submerged at some point in prehistory? While more conservative geologists attribute these signs to the prolonged action of time and climate, many wonder if that explanation is enough. Could this be evidence that the monument is much older than we think? Perhaps from an era predating the flood? This is where an intriguing theory comes in, proposed by Edgar Cayce, an American medium and photographer known for his visions and prophecies. Cayce claimed that the Sphinx was built by an advanced and forgotten civilization with the purpose of protecting something extraordinary, a secret repository of wisdom known as the Hall of Records. According to him, sacred documents, ancient texts, and technological knowledge from a lost time were hidden there. To safeguard this knowledge, the civilization would have sealed off access to the hall using the Sphinx itself. And when we talk about highly developed cultures that mysteriously vanished, it is impossible to ignore Atlantis, the legendary empire described by Plato. According to the Greek philosopher, Atlantis was an extremely advanced maritime civilization, powerful and rich in wisdom. But due to the pride and corruption of its people, it was destroyed in just one day and one night. Curiously, Plato insisted that he had not invented the story, but that he had received it from Egyptian priests who treated it as part of their own historical tradition. Was Atlantis merely an elaborate myth, or perhaps a distorted memory of a real civilization that flourished before the flood? Of course, all this might sound like a conspiracy theory, and it is true that Edgar Cayce was discredited by many, including scientists of his time. However, what's curious is that several of his predictions, such as the world wars, the rise of Nazism, racial tensions in the United States, and even the emergence of stress as a modern affliction, did in fact come true. This casts a new light on his bolder claims, including the existence of a secret library beneath the Sphinx. Since 1997, researchers have been using ground-penetrating radar to explore beneath the Sphinx. And the results have been nothing short of intriguing. Cavities and possible underground chambers have been identified beneath the structure. What might be hidden there, under this enigmatic monument with the body of a lion and the face of a human? A vault from the past, an echo of forgotten times. But don't rush. This journey through the mysteries of the antediluvian world is only just beginning. Leave behind the scorching heat of the Egyptian desert and come with me to dive, literally, into the depths of the ocean. Our next enigma comes from Japan, more precisely from the Ryukyu Islands region, southwest of Okinawa. That's where a submerged structure lies, bearing the unmistakable shape of a rectangular pyramid. Yes, you heard that right, a pyramid underwater. This submerged monument came to light, or rather to public awareness, only in 1986, when divers were exploring the coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan. Considering the antiquity of other historical structures, this discovery is relatively recent. But what truly draws attention in Yonaguni is the remarkable degree of symmetry. We are talking about regular steps, precisely cut walls, broad platforms, and clearly defined passages. Everything seems far too deliberately designed to be merely the result of natural erosion or tectonic activity. Too much of a coincidence, don't you think? And even more surprising, Yonaguni may not be an exception. In 2001, a joint expedition of Canadian and Cuban scientists announced something equally astonishing. Using sonar equipment and underwater robots, they detected, off the coast of Cuba and at a depth of around 700 meters, a series of formations that resemble pyramids, causeways, and even what might be an amphitheater. The extreme depth and geometric organization of these structures defy traditional geological explanations. To be located at that point on the ocean floor, these constructions would have to predate the end of the last ice age. In other words, they would be over 10,000 years old. Could they be remnants of a pre-diluvian city swallowed by the sea and forgotten by history? And there is another curious element, easily overlooked by an untrained eye. The structure at Yonaguni is aligned with the so-called ley lines. According to some theoretical schools of thought, these lines are invisible paths of magnetic energy that connect sacred or mysterious sites around the globe, places like Stonehenge, the pyramids of Egypt, and even points linked to the Orion constellation. Although ley lines currently lack scientific validation, they were taken seriously for quite some time. In 1927, Alfred Watkins, an amateur archaeologist, published the book The Old Straight Track, in which he described these supposed energy routes. The idea gained followers, and soon the Straight Track Club was founded, a group of enthusiasts devoted to identifying hidden geometric patterns scattered across the world. They believed that ancient civilizations built their monuments in alignment with these routes, not by coincidence, but based on knowledge of a kind of natural energy now nearly forgotten. And that brings us to another fascinating site, the mysterious Callanish stones in Scotland. For a long time, this archaeological site was underestimated in terms of its significance and age. However, more recent studies indicate that the complex was erected around 2900 BCE, which means it is older than Stonehenge itself, approximately 2480 BCE, and even the pyramids of Giza, usually dated to around 2500 BCE. This new analysis opens up an intriguing possibility. Could the ancestors of Stonehenge's builders have already been creating even older monuments, like those at Callanish? The stones there form a central circle and are arranged precisely to follow the lunar cycle. And here comes a breathtaking revelation. Centuries later, the site was used as an astronomical observatory and is still considered one of the best places in the United Kingdom to observe the sky, especially during the aurora borealis, which transforms the night into a spectacle of dancing lights. In other words, the ancients were not merely moving stones, they were studying the cosmos. And unsurprisingly, Callanish is also positioned along these mysterious ley lines, suggesting that perhaps there really is a global network connecting various sacred and astronomical sites through patterns we barely understand. And do you know who also spoke about this type of planetary energy? None other than Nikola Tesla. For him, the Earth functions as a gigantic natural electrical conductor. Some believe that ancient civilizations already had mastery over this kind of energy, and that they used this knowledge in ways that still elude us today. Some theorists even suggest that, in certain respects, these prehistoric civilizations were more technologically advanced than we are now. Of course, a parenthesis is necessary here. I'm not saying you should blindly believe all these theories. I don't even agree with all of them myself. But that's not the point. The point is that they're worth knowing. Many of these ideas, as unlikely as they may seem, are still the subject of serious research around the world. Some even claim that the Callanish stones conceal an interdimensional portal. Others say the site was built by non-human entities with the purpose of safeguarding ancient knowledge, meant to be awakened only at the right moment in humanity's timeline. But what about the people who live near these places shrouded in mystery? What do they have to say? On the Isle of Lewis in Scotland, where the enigmatic Callanish stones are located, local folklore preserves astonishing stories. According to legend, those imposing stones were once real giants, flesh and blood beings who inhabited the region. Oral tradition tells that for refusing to adopt the new faith spreading across the island, these giants were turned to stone as punishment. Other versions speak of druids imprisoned within the stones, remaining asleep as they await the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy that would one day bring them back to life. It may sound like a movie script, but it is precisely these stories passed down through generations that keep the mystery alive to this day. And now we reach the true turning point of this journey. A theory that, although not created by me, has been gaining ground in various circles of alternative research. It revolves around a topic that many dismiss without a second thought. Giants, yes, giants. Before that starts to sound like comic book fantasy, let's be clear. The goal here is not to convince anyone of improbable ideas, but rather to open space for reflection, to explore possibilities, including those that may seem strange at first glance, and to show that, however unusual they may be, these ideas have been the subject of study by serious researchers across the globe. But why does the idea of giants seem to make sense to so many people? To begin with, we have clear references in ancient texts. The Bible, for example, directly mentions the existence of such beings. In Genesis 6, verse 4, it is written, "In those days there were giants on the earth, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown." Or in other words, giants are described as part of the humanity that existed before the flood, precisely the era we're exploring. And this is not exclusive to Scotland or the Bible. In various cultures around the world, we find similar accounts. Cave paintings, stone inscriptions, sculptures and murals depict beings of impressive stature living alongside ordinary humans. In the Old Testament, the Anakim are described as a race of giants who lived in the mountains of ancient Canaan. Deuteronomy 9 verse 2 states, "A people great and tall, the descendants of the Anakim, of whom you have heard it said, who can stand before the sons of Anak?" And in Joshua 15 verse 14, there is an account of the expulsion of three of them, Sheshai, Ahiman and Talmai, from the city of Hebron by Caleb. These are not merely mythological tales. Names, places and bloodlines were recorded as part of the sacred history that shaped entire civilizations. Hindu tradition also contains references to giant beings. According to ancient Indian texts, during the Satya Yuga, the first and purest of the cosmic ages, human beings had gigantic proportions. Although this symbolism carries strong spiritual meaning, it still reinforces the recurrence of this theme in cultures that had no direct contact with one another. And the evidence does not stop there. Recent archaeological discoveries in China, for example, have revealed unusual human skeletons dated to around 3000 BC, belonging to the Longshan culture. What stands out is the height and physical build of these individuals, significantly above the average for the population of that era. Were they merely genetic outliers, or is there something more hidden behind these atypical physical traits? Even modern science struggles to explain certain findings. The genetic sequencing of ancient human remains has revealed the existence of lineages that do not fit into traditional family trees. A striking example is the discovery in 2010 of the Denisovans, a previously unknown human lineage identified from a small finger bone found in a cave in Siberia. These hominins coexisted with Neanderthals and Homo sapiens and left visible genetic traces in modern populations of Southeast Asia and Oceania. These discoveries raise an intriguing question. How many other human, or almost human, groups inhabited the Earth before written history? How many lineages vanished, or perhaps were concealed, leaving no visible trace in conventional historical records? The truth is that we still know only a small fraction of humanity's journey on this planet. Megalithic monuments, oral traditions, sacred texts, and scientific discoveries continually challenge us to reconsider what we deem impossible. Now get ready for one of those accounts that seem to come straight from a secret file. In 1988, Swiss writer and researcher Gregor Spuri claimed to have made an extremely unusual discovery during a trip to Egypt. According to him, during a private visit to a local collector, he was granted access to a remarkable artifact, a mummified finger measuring no less than 38 centimeters in length. Yes, you read that right, nearly half a meter of just finger. Based on human proportions, that size would indicate an individual approximately 5 meters tall. Spuri photographed the object and tried to purchase it in order to submit it to scientific analysis, but his offer was declined. The mysterious finger was never formally examined, leaving the question hanging in the air. Was it an elaborate hoax, a ritual object, or perhaps real evidence rejected by mainstream academia? Now think with me, what is harder to accept? That giants once walked the earth in ancient times? Or that civilizations thousands of years ago, without access to electricity, machinery, or digital calculations, managed to erect monuments like Stonehenge, the Great Sphinx, the Callanish stones, and so many other structures with such precision that they still challenge modern engineers? The Bible itself offers curious clues on the theme of ancient wisdom and knowledge. One remarkable example is the figure of Enoch, one of the most enigmatic characters in the entire Old Testament. In Genesis 5, verse 24, we read, "Enoch walked with God, and he was no more, because God took him." And in Hebrews 11, verse 5, the passage reinforces, "By faith Enoch was taken from this life, so that he did not experience death. He could not be found, because God had taken him away." And this suggests that Enoch had a direct and profound communion with the Creator, which may indicate access to truths and knowledge beyond common understanding. Another striking detail is the longevity of the first humans, according to the scriptures. Adam is said to have lived 930 years. Seth, his son, reached 912. Enoch lived 365 years before being taken, and Methuselah, the longest lived recorded, is said to have reached 969 years. Now pause and reflect. If we say that wisdom comes with time, imagine what someone with nearly 1,000 years of life could have learned, observed, and understood about the world, the universe, and the human spirit itself. Especially if we consider that they lived close to the origin of everything, direct witnesses to the earliest chapters of human history, with access to a pure and unfragmented source of knowledge. It is plausible to imagine that much of this knowledge was transmitted orally through generations until it was lost, hidden, or perhaps simply forgotten, waiting to be rediscovered by curious minds and open hearts. And that brings us to a fundamental question. Why did these figures live so long? The answer, according to the biblical account, is both simple and profound. God created human beings for eternity. In this context, death was not part of the original plan. The lifespans of the ancient patriarchs would simply reflect their closeness to creation and the spiritual purity of that time. Perhaps the fascination we feel for these topics, giants, hidden pyramids, sunken cities, and forgotten cultures, is not merely a product of curiosity. Perhaps it is an echo, an inner search for something we sense we once knew. In a world overwhelmed by shallow information and constant distractions, these mysteries remind us that there is still so much left to uncover. That history is not fully written, and that truth may be waiting for those who have the courage to ask the right questions. That is why these subjects keep resurfacing with such intensity. They attract millions of eyes, inspire documentaries, books, theories, because they touch on something essential, a desire that has never vanished, the human longing to understand what was lost, hidden, or left behind. We will meet again soon, and until then, may the enigmas of the past keep igniting in us the flame of discovery.